Welcome to Real Clear Politics on Sirius XM for Friday, July 25th. I'm Andrew Waldworth, and joining me are Real Clear Politics president and co-founder Tom Bevan, and sitting in for Carl Cannon, Heather Wilhelm of National Review. So, Tom, I want to start with a few polls and what they tell us about President Trump's position with the public. First, we have this Wall Street Journal poll that came out today, Friday, and the headline is "Resilient Trump Lifted by Improved View of the Economy." According to this poll, 47% rate the economy as excellent or good. And the Journal notes that that is an 11-point increase from April, and it's the most positive rating in its survey dating all the way back to 2021. Now, at the same time, you have this new data from Gallup, which also just came out today. Headline is "Independents Drive Trump's Approval to 37%, second term low," which is just slightly higher than the 34% he had at the end of his first term, which was the low for then. So help unpack this for us. What do these polls tell us about where the president stands with the American public right now?
You know, I think it's actually more of a positive story than a negative story for Trump. We had 4 polls come out today. Quantus Insights, Rasmussen, the Wall Street Journal, and Emerson. And Trump's approval rating overall was 46, 46, 47, 48. So it's a good amount of data that shows basically he's clustered in that 46 to 48% range, which, you know, is not a bad rating for him, given the fact that, as you saw in the Gallup poll, Democrats give him a 2% approval rating. I mean, they literally, it's as low as it could possibly be. So I think the bigger concern for Republicans is when you look at the generic ballot, because a lot of these polls, the Wall Street Journal and others, had a generic ballot associated with it, and Democrats are leading by 2 to 3 points.
This is a generic congressional
correct.
ballot.
It's the question that pollsters ask: if the election were held today, who would you vote for, the Republican or the Democrat? And no names attached. And every pollster asks this question, and so it just gives a sense of, sort of takes the temperature of the American people's perception of the two parties. And, you know, it's not unusual for Democrats to lead on this metric. It would be surprising if Republicans were leading on this metric at this point in the cycle. It's also not unusual for the out of power party to, you know, usually traditionally, historically, the first term midterms for the in party has been rough. And so it's that's a little concerning for Republicans, but they're sort of hanging in there. And now, as we've talked about before, the battle comes down to, I mean, again, we've got Epstein going on, we've got the Obama, Russiagate stuff, but at the end of the day, it's this big, beautiful bill. And who can sell to the country that this was a good thing, that it helps the economy, or this was a bad thing and it takes away Medicaid and, you know, from people, et cetera, et cetera. Those are the two narratives that the parties are pushing, and they're going to go home to the congressional districts in just a few days and have a month to basically sell it. And right now, if you look at the data on that, it looks like, you know, the public views the one big beautiful bill less favorably than favorably by about anywhere from 5 to 10 points, depending on the poll you're looking at. So Republicans are sort of starting in a hole there. But the good news is, what you mentioned, Annie, is that the economy is looking better. People are feeling better about the economy, and that remains the number one concern, number one issue of voters overall heading into the midterms.
Yeah. Heather, it does seem to me that you look at those economic numbers, you would think that would be giving him a lift. But maybe what's happening is all this other bad news is sort of offsetting that, because I did look at the RCP average today. It doesn't include the 4 polls Tom was talking about. But on the 23rd of this month, he was at 52.7%, which I think is the high for his second term. So
disapproval.
Yeah, disapproval. I'm sorry. Disapproval. So the high disapproval, a low approval. But Heather, what do you make the numbers? And, you know, to Tom's point, you know, what happens next?
Yeah, I think this is not too shabby. I was looking at his first term in July of 2017. He was minus 16 percentage points. His approval rating, it says, was 39.7% to 55.7. So this is quite a lift from that. And I think you're seeing a completely different term in the second term for Trump. I thought an interesting piece of this news was how he's polling among independents. He performed really he performed better than Biden did among independents in this last election. But I think that'll be really interesting. He's doing great among Republicans. He's got 88% approval rating upon Republicans. I think it's in the 60s of strongly approve, which is great with his base. So I think it'll be interesting to see how independents flush out over the next, year or two, deciding whether they like what they see.
Yeah. When does this start to affect the midterms, Tom? What's the sort of timing of this?
I mean, I think a lot of this stuff, because we're so tribal, it's baked into the cake a little bit, but certainly independents who, as Heather mentioned, will be an important piece of the midterm pie, right? Especially, in a lot of these House races that are going to be decided in these swing districts by a point or 2 points or 3 points. Probably 3, 4, 5, 6 months before. So I think Republicans have about, I don't know, maybe 6 to 8 months to move the needle in their direction, or Democrats, vice versa. It depends what happens. But when you get to end of Q1, beginning of Q2 of next year, people are going to be fairly locked in based on what they're feeling and seeing in the economy, at their kitchen tables, et cetera. That doesn't mean there can't be something that comes up, some event that shifts the political matrix and landscape. But if it's just sort of a standard issue election and there are no surprises, I would say 4 to 6 months beforehand is when people are going to get sort of dialed in and locked in on who they're going to vote for. So Republicans have some time, but it's not a lot.
Yeah. Well, Heather, you make a good point, which is that his base, he's performing well with his base, 88% approval in the Wall Street Journal poll, 66% strongly approving of him. But James Carville was on this week on CNN, I guess, and he says that if Trump loses 10% of that base, it will be a disaster for him. Because, and I think it's an interesting point, if he's not performing well with independents, forget about Democrats, but if he's not performing well with independents, the base becomes all the more important. And things like the Jeffrey Epstein story or other stuff like that, a 10% slip doesn't sound unreasonable to me. What do you make of that?
Well, that's a wait and see situation. I think James Carville is having an interesting news cycle on his own. Hunter Biden recently put him on blast, saying, I think, did he say he hasn't won an election in 40 years? And Carville was very gracious, actually, and said, I understand why Hunter would say that. But I think, the thing about Trump is there is always going to be a set segment of the population that hates him with the heat of 1,000 suns. And then there's going to be a certain section of the population that's going to love him no matter what he does. And so sure, he could drop 10 points. He could gain 10 points, but I think that's a wait and see situation.
Tom, what do you make of the Carville?
Yeah, I don't know. Look, yes, if you lost 10% of your base, if Trump went from 89 to 79, that'd be a serious problem for him. It'd be a serious problem for any president. The same thing, you could say the same thing of Barack Obama when he was president.
Do you think the Epstein thing could push him there, though?
It could. This is one of those things where I think people they're interested in it, but is it determinative of their vote? Are Trump voters really going to not vote for him or not vote for Republicans? This is the interesting thing about Trump is during his political life as a national figure, he's gotten people to vote for him. But in 2018, 2022, when he's not on the ballot, a lot of those folks are not interested in voting for Republicans, standard issue Republicans. And so we'll see if that sort of pattern holds true, even though, Trump's going to campaign for them and do all that. So, it's going to be interesting to see. I don't know the answer to that. Certainly if he lost a bunch of folks in his base, could that drag Republicans down in the midterms? Sure. But Trump's not running again. He's done. And the question is, what comes next and how do voters respond to whoever's going to take the mantle moving forward in 2028?
Yeah, Heather, I don't think the fear is that they vote for a Democrat. It's that they don't vote at all. Isn't
That's
that the
right.
problem? I mean,
That's right.
these are the so-called low propensity voters out there. You won't have Trump at the top of the ticket if they're not happy with the Epstein story, or whatever the story is at the time, that they'll just stay home. And if that happens, big day for the Democrats, I would imagine.
The Epstein story is interesting, and obviously it's a bit of a circus how it's been laid out. It kind of reminds me of, there was this meme that went around the first time Trump was elected, and it's like, well, I'd love to see old Donnie Trump wiggle his way out of this jam, and then of course Donald Trump wiggles his way out easily, and we move on to the next to the next thing.
The walls are closing in.
Exactly, we got him this time.
Yeah.
But I don't know if I think this was this morning, Trump actually went on, talked with the press and threw some names under the bus regarding Epstein. He said, you shouldn't be talking about me. You should be talking about, I think he threw Bill Clinton out there. He threw Larry Summers out there. So to me, that signifies that I think we're going to see some information forthcoming. I think the real thing about how the Epstein thing's been handled is, Pam Bondi went out there in February and made this big production about how it was on her desk and we were going to see it. And then all of a sudden it was crickets. And then all of a sudden it was like, there's nothing to see here, folks. And I think that was actually the real mismanagement of all of this, and I think they should just release it. I think it would do a lot to calm down this news cycle.
Yeah. Well, Tom, do you think they're finding their footing on the Epstein story?
Maybe.
Yeah.
I mean, look, I don't think people are going to be surprised to find that Trump's name is in those files. I mean, I think that's kind of well established. We've seen pictures of them. We know they were friendly, and then they had a falling out. So I mean, I guess it depends on the context in which his name is mentioned and whether it's like really bad or not. So you have to assume that the Trump administration, the folks who've seen the files, know more than the public, and the way that they've been handling it would lead you to believe that maybe it is a little more damaging than we might think, and that's why they're going to such lengths to tying themselves in knots, trying to not release this stuff, or slow walking it or dragging their feet. I mean, part of the problem, I agree with Heather. I think Pam Bondi has botched this, and everybody has, really. I mean, JD Vance was on a podcast, Theo Von's podcast, saying we need to release the list. I mean, it's like like 2 weeks ago or something. But a lot of this stuff was sown years ago. Don Jr. tweeting and Trump, everybody saying we need to release the files, and they sort of played this up, and then they get here and now they're not doing it. And so I'm not sure, even if Pam Bondi hadn't botched it as badly as she had, I think it would still be an issue that they were releasing all the, they're releasing all the stuff on JFK and MLK, but now they're holding back on the Epstein files and trying, there's no news here. Let's move on and talk about something else. I mean, I think they'd still have a problem. It just might, I think it's been exacerbated by the missteps that they've had since they've, come into office the second time.
Yeah. Heather, I have one more thought about this, or question really, and that's this, is that, Trump is unique for a number of reasons, but one of the reasons he's unique is because this is his second term, but so he's a lame duck, even though he's sort of in his first term. It's kind of a odd thing, we don't see this. And we talk a lot about the midterms, but, he will be a lame duck, or is a lame duck today. I mean, and come the midterms, he'll really be a lame duck, especially if he loses the House. But how much does this sort of decline in the polling and the trouble with the news right now, does that make it harder for him to have this sort of iron grip that he's got on the Republican Party? I mean, at some point, do senators and congressmen sort of say, hey, he's damaged goods, he's yesterday's news, I'm going to move on? And is this sort of moving up that date if he doesn't recover from this Epstein thing?
I keep thinking about when all those UFO flat files were released, and there's just this incredible information about widely documented UFOs flying around the U.S., interfering with military craft. They release these files. Nobody cares, right? I'm exaggerating, but I think honestly, I think if they release these files, same thing. I think the story goes away. I think, you're going to find that in the 90s, there were a lot of famous people who were palling around with Epstein, and that was before his reputation sort of fell apart. So I wouldn't be surprised to see a number of huge names on this. I see, and Tom, you alluded to this too, I see the problem is more in the process, and that it just seems like there's a cover up. It seems like there's dishonesty. There's the going back and forth. I think that's the problem. And I think transparency would probably solve it.
Mm-hmm. But does it make it harder for him to rule, all these things sort of adding up, Tom?
I don't know. I mean, you look at Trump, and when somebody gets out of line, Thomas Massey or whatever, I'm going to primary them. Let's find somebody, and he'll still have that power. He'll still have that sway with the base of the Republican Party, in whether he's a lame duck now or a lame duck even when he's out of office, for God's sakes. If someone pisses him off, he could, drop the hammer on him. So, and I think Trump is probably unique in that way. He holds more power over. He started this movement. I mean, this is his movement. And even as it's the torch is passed on to JD Vance or whatever, I think he's still got control of it and will for a long time. And so I think Republicans will probably stay in line because they don't want to feel him, feel his wrath, because he could do it at any time if they displease him.
All right. Well, guys, we're going to take a break. You're listening to Real Clear Politics on Sirius XM. I'm here with Heather and Tom. We'll be right back with more right after these words. Welcome back to Real Clear Politics on Sirius XM. I'm Andrew Walworth. I'm here with Tom and Heather. And Tom, President Donald Trump issued an executive order yesterday, Thursday, says he will create some order when it comes to the NCAA's new name, image, and likeness programs. This all comes in the wake of July 1st, which was the date when schools are now allowed to directly pay players for their services. Basically, it's turning college athletes into paid performers. New era for college athletes, huge change. You're a former college athlete yourself. Is the president right to get involved in this?
Gosh, I don't know. I do know that I do agree that the combination of the NIL and look, the idea of paying college athletes has been around for a long time, and in many ways has a lot of merit, right? Because these kids, the schools make a lot of money. The NCAA makes a lot of money off of these kids. Some of them don't go on to play professionally, or maybe they do, or they get hurt, and so the idea of paying college athletes is as I said, has merit and had merit. But when you combine that with the transfer portal, right, where you can basically jump from school to school, whoever's the highest bidder, that is a real problem. And I think that's what has really eroded and degraded college sports to a point where, you've got kids that used to be, you'd recruit somebody and they'd be there for the full 4 years, and they'd be a diehard, member of that school. And now they go to 4 different schools, and there's no loyalty, there's no allegiance and all of that. It's simply, who's going to pay me the most money? And that encourages,
it's professional sports. Yeah.
And so, look, do I think the government needs to get involved to try and stop? And I don't know how they're going to enforce this executive order, what the mechanism is. I mean, certainly the Trump administration has used executive orders to, browbeat universities and sort of bend them to their will and get them to do things that they want them to do. So maybe this will work. But I think to solve the problem, it needs to be broader. I'm generally not for Congress getting involved. I think usually when Congress gets involved in something, they make it worse, not better. But if the NCAA isn't able to figure it out and sort it out themselves, then maybe you have to have some congressional involvement. But I agree with the general sentiment of trying to fix it, because I think we've seen, because it happened really, really fast, right? It went from 0 to 60, and the system just kind of, fell apart. And so I understand the idea and the sentiment behind it, but I don't know if this is going to do the job.
Yeah. Heather, what do you make of it?
I was so happy, Tom, that you went first on this one because I was briefly debating, pretending that I knew what I was talking about on this topic. And I totally don't. I need someone to explain it to me like I'm 5 years old. I'm old enough to remember when you would go. I loosely follow college basketball, and I remember you'd have the same guys coming back every
That's right.
year, even though they were really good. And this year you can follow a team and it's a completely new roster the next year. I think I could go on a side rant here about the whole American youth sports culture. I mean, with these new, you have kids leaving high school early now to go play college sports. I think there's something a little wacky and off balance about the whole thing, but I do agree, these kids are bringing a ton of revenue to these schools. I think the idea of them being employees, which that was bandied about, I think, during the Biden administration, is not a good idea at all. But there needs to be some sort of balanced compensation. The problem is it's so murky and so confusing. I think I would hope that, like me, your average American is very confused about how this whole structure works.
Yeah. Well, I think that's fair. I do think, Tom, one of the interesting things is what Heather mentioned is trying to make them into to employees, which is something that Bernie Sanders and people like that have been pushing for. They want them to be able to unionize,
That's
organize,
right.
and I guess to strike. And the administration does not want that.
You got to seize the means of production.
Yeah.
Yeah, look, I don't. I think Northwestern, which is down the street from where I live in Chicago, I think they were one of the first schools that tried to form a union. I don't know that they were successful at that, but the student athletes. So yeah, it's a tough subject because, like I said, I think you do want these kids to get paid for their efforts. They shouldn't go these schools, the NCAA, they should not be able to make millions and millions of dollars, which, by the way, they turn around and pay multi-million dollars to these coaches who are coaching these kids, and the kids are getting nothing. So you want the kids to get paid, but it has gotten so crazy and so out of control so quickly where these students, I'm thinking, my mind is set as football here because that's obviously the dominant sport and where a lot of the money is made and being paid now.
Yeah, Libby Dunn is probably the highest paid, right?
Well, Livy Dunn, okay, so she's the gymnast from LSU,
Yeah.
but I'm talking about Quinn Ewers, for example, quarterback at Texas. Now he decided to go in the NFL instead of, he was offered like $6 or $7 million to stay in college and just transfer and play for another school. Well, that's like 3 or 4 times what he's going to make on a rookie contract in the NFL, right? So, I'm shocked that he didn't do that. But even players that are, not superstar players are making 7 figures in NIL money, which is, way more than they're going to make in the pros on a rookie contract. So, again, I understand that I think the system has to be changed and fixed, but gosh, I don't know if Trump and Congress are the ones to do it.
Yeah. All right. Well, it is that time.
You can't be serious, man. You cannot be serious.
I don't think this segment needs any more introduction. Tom, what do you got for us?
I am not wearing my "You Cannot Be Serious" shirt, although Andy, I have it for you, and I will be giving it to you later. My John McEnroe "You Cannot Be Serious" shirt. My "You Cannot Be Serious" is Sunny Hostin at The View. I mean, we heard a lot of people complain about Stephen Colbert, and there was a lot of overwrought commentary, but I'm singling her out as being among the worst because she is among the worst. Obviously, on The View, she said that Stephen Colbert getting, I guess, let go, but he's going to be on the air for 10 months, and he's still going to make $14 million over the next 10 months. That this was the dismantling of our democracy and the dismantling of our Constitution. And we should all really, really, really be concerned about it and be concerned about, our ability to speak truth to power because free speech is the cornerstone of our democracy, blah, blah, blah. And then people applauded her, which is why these, folks on The View continue to run, I think, the dumbest show on television. So Sunny Hostin, I'm sorry, you cannot be serious.
Heather, what you got?
Okay. So I am in general a little bit baffled by the constant influx of superhero movies that keep coming out. It's incredible to me. We have Superman this summer. We have a bazillion other ones, but I don't know if y'all have been alerted to this latest offering. And I have to read the title because I'm not sure I'll remember it. It is Aztec Batman Clash of Empires. So this is this is the 50,000th or so Batman reboot, but this one takes place in the Aztec Empire. Batman is, I believe, it's a cartoon. I believe he's an Aztec citizen whose father is slain by the colonialists, and it's a major superhero face-off against the evil colonialists. And you know, I don't think even the Aztecs liked the Aztecs. Okay, like I mean, the Aztecs are not a great example, you know, with the child sacrifice and everything. So I literally did not. I wasn't sure if this was real. I looked it up. I watched the trailer. It is indeed real. It's coming out this fall. So there you have it, Aztec Batman.
All right.
You cannot be serious with that.
You cannot be serious. Well, Tom, you might not like this, but my vote goes to the FCC for approving that Paramount and Skydance merger, $8.4 billion deal. Brendan Carr said there was no connection between the approval and the $16 million CBS, $60 million that CBS handed over to Donald Trump. And yet he said this, he said Skydance's commitment to make significant changes at the once storied CBS broadcast network. In particular, Skydance has made written commitments to ensure that the new company's programming embodies a diversity of viewpoints from across the political and ideological spectrum. So
what's
to me, this whole thing,
Andy?
well, it smacks of government intervention, smacks of censorship, something I'm against. If Carl was here, he'd be agreeing with me. Democrats say when they get their House majority back, they're going to launch investigations. I think they're right to do so. So Brendan Carr, you cannot be serious. Wow. And with that, we're going to take a break. You're listening to Real Clear Politics on Sirius XM. We'll be back with more right after this. Welcome back to Real Clear Politics on Sirius XM. I'm Andrew Walworth, and for our next segment, RCP contributor Maggie Miller talks with Real Clear Investigations editor J. Peter Zane about his recent article, Why AI's Siren Song is So Hard to Resist. The full story can be found at RealClearPolitics.com. And now here's Maggie Miller in conversation with Peter Zane.
Peter, thanks for being here.
Thanks so much for having me, Maggie.
So today we're going to discuss one of your recent articles you wrote for Real Clear Politics. Your article, Why AI's Siren Song is So Hard to Resist, discusses how we've transformed with our devices and seek out less hassle, something that AI seems to be providing very well. So since AI is meeting this basic human nature, can you talk a little bit about why you think this was an important subject to delve into and what we need to know and discuss?
Sure. So I write a column every other week for Real Clear Politics, and one of the challenges is, especially with so many things that are in the news that lots of people are writing about, is what can I say that other people aren't? And honestly, you know, that's often hard to do, and I fall short of that. But I have noticed in journalism, unfortunately, there's really been a trend towards just repeating a message and not so much saying something that's new and interesting, but that is just amplifying a narrative that people want. I think if you read a lot of columns, you'll see how much they just seem to sort of repeat other people's talking points. So I read an article in Wired magazine when I was doing our links for RCI, because we not only produce original journalism, but we aggregate terrific journalism from many other outlets. And Wired did a story about the rise of AI romantic partners, which was sort of, I hadn't heard of it. Have you heard about this?
No, and I'm kind of thankful that I haven't.
But they have, if you remember the Joaquin Phoenix movie, Her, or there's a new movie which I just saw, Companion. So it's this idea that AI, as we know, Siri and Alexa can interact with us in certain ways. And that's probably getting better and better. And what Wired said is that perhaps 20% of American adults have actually gone to AI sites that offer romantic partners. Doesn't mean they all have romantic partners or there was just a small number, but it struck me as fascinating. And I have for years been following a lot of the concern that we have about technology in general and technology leading to loneliness, the death of conversation, that we are interacting much more with our phones and our devices than we are with each other. And I've heard so many people decry this. I don't think it's a healthy thing either. But what I don't hear people saying is, why is this happening? Okay, so years ago, I wrote a book with a genius professor at Duke University named Adrian Bejan, and I detailed his discovery of the constructal law in my column. But the basic idea is that everything in nature moves to have more freedom and more access to the world around them. And we, human beings, as part of nature, are informed by this law as well. And so what I extrapolated was that we may not like the fact that machines seem to dehumanize us in some way and make us more attached to inanimate objects than animate objects. But the question is why? And I think that the constructal law that Bejan discovered provides part of this answer. And just as water and lightning and trees and everything around us sort of moves in order to increase freedom, that we have this same imperative in some ways. We also have minds and free will, so we're not quite as controlled. But I thought that it shed some interesting light on why something that very smart people say is a bad and dangerous trend continues to proliferate. And I think most of our viewers would probably say, geez, I don't know if this is a good idea, but I'm sure there's going to be more romantic partners in the future, AI romantic partners, than less. And so what I hope to add to the conversation was this law of physics that would help explain how we as rational creatures, supposedly with free will, are often guided by physics and forces of nature to act in ways that some people would say is against our self-interest, but in fact, we see it as being in our self-interest in a lot of ways.
No, I mean, it's interesting. Obviously, you wonder what this means for the future of like real human connection, but even just the baseline of artificial intelligence where people, so-and-so is part of the iPad kid generation. And now people are being like, what is going to happen with regards to the AI generation? This is almost then taking things a step further and wondering what's going to happen with real human connection with regards to the AI generation.
I mean, and I think you see this with the declining birth rates around the country. It's very interesting. Darwin, I'm not a scientist, but I mean, Darwin would have suggested that as we have more wealth, we would in fact have more children, that our imperative to pass on our DNA would mean that, gee, the richer I am, the more I'm going to try to make more copies of me, a la Elon Musk, right? But in fact, what you see is when you have prosperity, when you have freedom in some ways, people have fewer children. And they have fewer children in part because of the demands and expense, the emotional demands, and so forth. But I think also part of it is that you want to invest more in the children that you have so they themselves can, to put it in physics terms, flow more easily across the landscape. That was less of an issue back when everybody lived on farms in small towns and having 10 kids was an advantage. Now it can be a disadvantage. But I think what Adrian's work shows is that Darwinian imperative is actually less important than the imperative to move more freely and have access. And that often leads us to have fewer children. And I'll tell you one interesting thing too, is that a lot of the feedback I got, because I said, kids can be a hassle. I have, children myself and I love my children. And how many people agreed with that statement? Okay. And I don't think, honestly, I think my children are a blessing, but I think there really has been a movement towards people saying, I want to do certain things, and children get in the way of that, without thinking about all the other emotionally complex rewards that they have. And those emotionally complex rewards, those, if you think about you as a parent, like having to give in, having to sacrifice, those are things that we for a long time thought made us more human. This is fulfilling my human experience. Dealing with tragedy and setbacks is actually, or overcoming hard things is part of what makes us human. I think that we are, and it makes sense to some level, moving to a world where we're going to reduce those things. I don't need that. What do I need any setback for? What do I need any limit on my autonomy? And I think that that is a natural urge, as much as the poets and philosophers might say that it's dehumanizing.
No, it's interesting. AI just provides that ease that some people, you hope to find ease with a future partner in real human interaction. But if that's becoming increasingly difficult, maybe people would turn to AI. Hopefully, we're not seeing more and more people turning to AI relationships, but it's definitely an interesting trend to look into. And I appreciate you for shedding some light on that. So, Peter, thank you so much for your time.
Thank you, Maggie. It's been a pleasure, as always.
That was Maggie Miller in conversation with Real Clear Investigations editor, Peter Zane. You can see more of Maggie's interviews on the Real Clear Politics YouTube channel and at RealClearInvestigations.com. I'm Andrew Walworth, and we'll be back with more Real Clear Politics right after this.
Welcome back to the show. I'm Carl Cannon, Washington Bureau Chief, Real Clear Politics. You're listening to us on SiriusXM Radio. Talking now with Harry Litman, who is one of the brightest legal commentators I know. I've been reading Harry for years. I think first in the LA Times. Does that sound right?
And that was a previous chapter. Yeah.
Yeah. And Harry was a U.S. attorney, worked in the Justice Department. He's a liberal Democrat, makes no bones about it, but offers concise and insightful political legal commentary and without ad hominem arguments. So he's perfect for me. Thanks for joining us.
Thanks for having me, Carl. Thanks for the kind intro.
So, Harry, you and I had a similar reaction to this lawsuit that President Trump filed against the Wall Street Journal. And, he said the Wall Street Journal says it had seen or got hold of, a little vague about the details, but a bawdy birthday card that Donald Trump sent to Jeffrey Epstein for, I don't know if you pronounce his name Epstein or Epstein. He's dead now, so I can't ask him, but for his 50th birthday. He died in prison, as everyone now knows. But Trump said flatly he didn't send it. He said it's malicious. He's called up Rupert Murdoch. He threatened to sue. He says it doesn't exist. But I'm wondering if, I don't think the Wall Street Journal would just print something like this. I don't think they'd make it up. I know these people, and I'm wondering if the president has put himself in some peril, not legal peril, but real risk. That if this thing does exist, he looks ridiculous, even to his MAGA supporters. And you wrote a piece about that. Tell our listeners what you think.
Yeah. So, look, I share your instinct, as I think does anyone with any sophistication. The Wall Street Journal is a really venerable paper. We're talking about the news gathering side of it, which has, a reputation for excellence. There's a couple lawsuits recently that really were not strong, and Trump was able to settle by essentially leveraging executive power to bring them pain for other holdings. That's just not going to happen here. But the bigger point is, as you say, as you surmise, and as anyone in DC press world would, they could not have published this without buttoning it down 6 ways and adding suspenders and having lawyers in the room and the like. They were ready for this, and this is really a throwback to how things used to be when the press, and big press in particular, were really fighting in any kind of defamation lawsuit, and they have the advantage of a constitutional standard that says that Trump is going to have to prove that it was false and that they knew it was false. And what struck me as so imprudent, and sounds like you as well, is, he made it all about this letter, which the odds of its not existing, I think, are astronomical. And in fact, Carl, we found out just today that apparently there's an extra copy of this in the estate of Epstein. It just, to me, makes it more likely that it's going to come out one way or another. I'll get back to the lawsuit in a moment. But having made it all about the existence, having come out with this sort of Trump reflex of it's a fake, it's a fake, it's fake media, then when that card gets turned over, and it's going to because it exists, and if nothing else, I think it'll happen before, but if nothing else, the lawsuit will make it come out. As you say, ridiculous. What's he going to say? I forgot about this and the letter. Yeah.
You know what, Harry? That's exactly well, it's not exactly. It's what Alan Dershowitz said. There was, he could have said any number of things. Alan Dershowitz basically said, I don't remember sending this, and if I do, I don't remember what I wrote. I mean, I forget the exact phrase, but 20 years ago, I was once interviewed for a book, Harry, and a guy, no, I was once in a book. I showed up as a kind of heroic investigative reporter. And
there was a book about you, Carl. Don't you remember? Yeah,
it was about a murder case that I covered,
Yeah.
and suddenly I show up as this heroic figure. And then there's these quotes for me, and I found the author, David Rose. I called him up. I said, David, it's really flattering, the portrait you made of me, but where did you get these quotes? It's a long pause. He says, I'm kind of, my feelings are kind of hurt. Don't you remember we went to lunch and you gave me your file? And as he's talking, I recognize his voice. I thought, oh. So there was, and I was a young man, and it was only, it was 3 or 4 years earlier lunch. Trump could have easily said he didn't remember, and he might not remember. That I would assume he doesn't remember, but he didn't say that, and he didn't. Yeah. He could have just said, something. This is the Democrats trying to change the conversation. I may have written this, I may not have. It didn't. I don't think I did, but
what else
whatever.
I think he could have said, as he did with. Look, it was juvenile. It was stupid. This is not. No one's accusing him yet of having had any improper sort of activity within the Epstein world.
Well, and this was long before Epstein was ever charged, too.
Yeah. Yes. Which is a whole nother tell, because he is that makes this grand jury gambit completely also a diversion. But I agree with you, right? I mean, we've certainly seen him weather storms worse than that before. When he just, I was, you got me. I'm a little bit of a jerk. We parted company, as they did in 2004. It was over a real estate deal, but nevertheless. So it was perplexing, is one way to put it. I just want to say, I think foolish. That's his kind of very thin playbook. I'm going to sue you. And he had said that on Tuesday, Rupert Murdoch, before you do. And then sure enough, he wants to follow through, but it just can't end well. And as you say, this is mainly now a political scandal having to do with, you look at everything else that's going on now, including the revelation today that they told him he was in the files. And it comes down to, how thick as thieves were he and Epstein. We have Epstein's girlfriend and one of the victims and his brother saying very thick. We will see what they have Ghislaine Maxwell say, but that's all kind of mucky and amorphous. And yeah, I knew him some. No, I didn't do anything wrong. That's where it would stand. This, though, he's made the punchline surely to go against him in a way that, given the ire, and you probably have a better sense of this than I, but the real vehemence and focus of the MAGA crowd, when that car gets turned over, guess what? He fooled us. He lied to. That's.
You're listening to Harry Littman, legal scholar, former U.S. attorney, law school professor in California, former Justice Department official, author. Writes. He wrote on this week. Was that calling for the Hill, Harry?
No, I do. I mainly
was
write
that your
at the
Substack?
but I
Yeah,
do. I also am the senior legal editor for New Republic, and
that's right. New Republic is where I saw it. All right, two things I wanted to ask you about. The first is, did it bring to mind Oscar Wilde's famous lawsuit to you? It's a different thing, but Oscar Wilde was accused of being homosexual in England in the late 19th century, when that was actually a crime. and he felt forced to sue for defamation. He did
That's
sue.
right.
He withdrew the lawsuit. I think 3 days into the trial, but then now the courts had no choice or the authorities to charge him. He was convicted in jail. Now, I'm not saying that's going to happen to President Trump, and he hasn't. My guess is that he's not. My guess is that he saw what Jeffrey Epstein was like and got rid of him. I give him the benefit of the doubt on Epstein, but this overplaying your hand in the legal system is what I'm talking about. Did it remind you at all of that case?
I think it did, and he had a similar back then where you couldn't fess up for being homosexual. He had a similar sort of flamboyance and pugnacity. What it reminded me also of, Carl, is when people learned about President Clinton's deposition in the civil Lewinsky case, because you were just sitting there as I was an appointee of the president, but with a sick feeling in the pit of your stomach that this is going to go on, there'll be maneuvers, etc. The card will turn over, and it's not gonna be fully exonerating. So that dynamic, not just that it's a loser, but it's a loser that extends, maybe goes to depositions, maybe goes to discovery, that it would not otherwise if it were just in this amorphous political footing. He's now served it up for a train wreck as the conclusion of this little dispute, where he said, and I agree with you, unnecessarily, total fake doesn't exist, etc.
Right.
And
Well, Harry,
one more quick point, if I could,
yeah,
is
go ahead,
I think
please.
the story today shows that not only did the Journal do its homework, they've got other stuff too that I think is going to come out little by little that was part of their verification process, and it's just not good footing for Trump.
You mentioned at the beginning that well, real quick, I want to say, I don't know Trump well. I covered
Me too.
I covered Bill Clinton extensively. I did
Mhm.
know him. I've met him a couple of times. I've interviewed him once, but I'm wondering if there's anybody around him. He said he's vehement that this doesn't exist. My guess is as yours, it does exist, and that he forgot it. But there's nobody around him to say, is the problem with somebody say, "Look, Mr. President, before you do this, let's hold off on this. Let's think about it. Let's wait for the other shoe to drop. Let's take our time in responding to this." I don't know that there's anybody around him who can talk to him like that.
Yeah, and it seems to me it's a big difference between Trump 1.0 and 2.0. Not only are all the adults having been ushered from the room because they're not sycophants, but really he's more increasingly confident in his own judgment, but there's no reason to think that judgment, especially where the legal system is concerned, has gotten any more trenchant.
Well, okay, we got 30 seconds left, but that sets up my last question real well for you, because he sued CBS, he sued ABC, he's collected tens of millions of dollars. I think 40 million total. He's donated. He's going to give it to the Trump Presidential Library, which is a novel way of funding presidential libraries. Do you think that emboldened him? That 30 seconds emboldened him, those success in lawsuits, to do this?
I think so, because he just thinks in terms of winning and losing. And in that sense, he won those cases. It's not anything to do with the merits of them, but it's just such a basic miscalculation that anyone with sophistication would tell him. You're not going to be able to leverage other things of the Journal to make them genuflect to you. They're in it for the news side, and they're ready for war.
All right. Well, that's going to do it for us. You've been listening to Harry Littman, legal scholar, and Carl Cannon, Washington Bureau Chief. Join us again tomorrow at the same time on SiriusXM, 6 p.m. here in the East and 3 p.m. in California, where I grew up and Harry lives.
Thanks, Carl. Thanks for having me.